When I was younger, I was so determined to prove that I am ambitious and I can do the job. Instead, he used the word, good luck with your dreams.
How do you encourage more women to be that new person in an industry?
I've always learned that confidence comes after doing the hard things, not before.
Yeah.
And so if we wait for women to have the confidence to do something, like we won't.
There's a huge amount of power in being underestimated.
Yeah. You have to be embarrassed a few times before you gain the confidence to go back again. Hey, I'm still standing. Hey, I'm still passionate about what I'm doing. I'm just gonna keep going.
Welcome to Mistakes Over Failure. I'm Dr. Christine Crawford.
And I'm Debbie Carew. We are so excited to share a special guest with you today.
So today we are joined by Bianca Gates. Bianca, if you please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Bianca Gates. I am the co-founder of Birdies. We make women's stylish and comfortable flats. I am a mom of 2 teenagers, a 16-year-old daughter and a 13-year-old boy. I am married and live in San Francisco, California, and it's wonderful to be here with you today.
So the way that we usually start off is we start with a little bit of lightning round. So just some easy questions to start.
Okay.
So first of all, sunshine or rain?
Oh, sunshine.
All day long. All day long.
All day. I'm from Orange County, yes.
Oh.
Exactly. Yeah. You could move to Vancouver like me, and then you'd have a whole lot of rain.
More rain, okay.
I still like sunshine too. Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Okay.
I kind of know that from Instagram. We're kind of cheap these days having social media around.
Cats are too independent. I wanted to snuggle.
They're a little moody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Little moody.
Cats. Yeah.
Nature or nurture?
This is the fun debate. Can I 50-50? Or do I have to pick
Christine?
one?
No, I'm 50-50, so I'm gonna allow her to choose.
Oh, okay, great. I mean, it's not. It's a little bit of, you know, I mean, with teenagers, you got to have to refine what's naturally there.
Absolutely. Similar to that, when you sort of talk about family, sports or artistic endeavors?
I love sports.
Okay. What's your favorite sport?
Any sport. I just love the competitiveness, the teamwork. My daughter's an athletic golfer. We just did a 2-day tournament where I was her caddy for 36 holes this weekend. Cool. My son is big into baseball and basketball. My daughter was a gymnast, a hardcore gymnast for many, many years. So, and volleyball player. So anything that revolves around people, communication, competition, I love it all.
Me too. What would you say to that?
Yeah, I'm not a big sports person. I personally enjoy swimming, but if I'll watch anything live.
Yeah.
But like a good Southern girl, grew up watching WWE and Hulk Hogan.
Yeah. There you go. That's a good sport to watch.
So let's dive in. Why don't we start with, can you walk us through your career journey? Like, we know who Bianca is today, and we'll unpack that in a little while, but take us back, to your origin story.
Yeah. I mean, I think so much of my career journey does start with my childhood and what shaped what I wanted to be when I grew up. My parents are immigrants from Latin America. My mom was born and raised in a small town in Bolivia, and my dad in Argentina. They met after college and decided to plant roots in the United States. My mom didn't speak any English, and she had never left her small city other than to go to Argentina for a couple years of university. And so watching them sort of have this entrepreneurial spirit in the United States, start from nothing, and even learn the language and understand how to navigate the United States was really interesting to see. I was born in Arkansas. My dad was going to school there, and my mom was working in the cafeteria, making sandwiches for the students there because she couldn't speak the language. We then moved to California. I'm the oldest of 4 kids, and growing up there was wonderful. I always had very strong family values. We didn't have a lot of extended family or friends, so for us, our family unit was everything. And there was this pivotal moment I'll never forget. I was around 8 years old, and we were sitting around our kitchen table as we did every morning before going to school, having breakfast. And my dad always sat at the head of the table. It was a rectangular table, and my mom to his right, and then the rest of our 4 kids around the table. And each morning the sun would be rising and it would sort of blind us at breakfast. But my dad's back was always against the sun. And I remember one day I asked him at around 8, I just said, well, why is it fair that you get to always sit there where the sun doesn't bother you and we have to agonize with it? And he looked at me very directly and he said, in the nicest of ways, whoever makes the money gets to pick where they sit. And, I think for me as a young girl, seeing my mom not being able to choose where she sits because she's not making the money, even though she was managing a household with 4 children and a language barrier, I just thought, money matters. And as a woman, I want to make sure that I had a seat at the table. I could choose where I sat. And forevermore, that became my biggest goal in life was, how do I make a lot of money? And I would say that's like the first chapter of my career. And now that I'm like 150 years old, there are many chapters in our career, as we know. But my first chapter was, what's a job that I could do that would make me a lot of money fast and independent? And so my first job, I was a bus girl at a restaurant, and that got me into the restaurant sort of scene. And my senior year in high school, I was waiting tables. And then by the time I was 18, 19, 20, I was able to serve alcohol at restaurants. And I learned, that as you build up the receipts at these tables, your tip goes up. So I worked at Macaroni Grill. It's like an Olive Garden close to where I lived. And while other waiters were going to the tables asking them if they would like something to drink, an alcoholic beverage, people would normally say no. And I would come with a bottle of red and a bottle of white. I'd say, which one do you want? And sure enough, people would say yes. How could you say no? And at the end of the dinner, instead of asking, do you want dessert? Most people are going to say no. I came with a dessert tray and I said, which one would you like? Right. And so I would walk out every night with money in my pocket, and every 2 weeks I'd get direct deposit. And I was like, this is fascinating. Like, I can make money fast, and sales is going to probably be the career path I take because I can always end up making more, and I'm not going to be capped towards a salary. So that was sort of the beginning of my career journey, the first chapter of my career journey.
So would you say that Facebook Meta was your second, or would you say it's the third?
That was my second. Okay. So I graduated. I lived at home when I went to school. I never went away to college. And it was very important for me to spread my wings. I went to UC Irvine. It was a 20-minute commute from my parents' house. And so by the time I was able to leave my parents' house, I knew I wanted to work in a big city where people made a lot of money, and sales was a big thing. And so for me, that was New York City. Oh. And so my dad, sat me down and he just said, there's a lot of paths you can take in media, in sales. You love television and TV shows. What about TV sales? And I thought, that's interesting. I had no idea that existed. So when I got to New York, I did media sales. I worked for Univision, Spanish language TV network. And then my sales manager there took me to Viacom, MTV, and VH1. I was doing sales for them. And I learned a lot. I loved sales. I loved being on a team. And I met my husband while in New York. And so we ultimately, fast forward, moved to San Francisco. And that's where we settled down, and I had my first child. And I realized, okay, the first chapter I had made money. I felt safe and secure. I felt like I could always do that. My second chapter was about proving to myself that I could sit at a table with all the smart kids. Because in sales, it's not, it doesn't really reflect sort of like this, high intelligence. It's more like high EQ and the hustle. And I proved that. And so I read this commencement speech by Sheryl Sandberg, who she was the chief operating officer at Facebook at the time. And this was her 2011 commencement speech at Barnard College, where she talks about leaning in and don't take your foot off the gas pedal ever until you're actually willing to leave. And I had just had my daughter, and I had a lot of people around me saying, you should consider quitting your job. You're a mom now, kids need their parents, and things like I would never leave my kid with a stranger, speaking of my nanny, and just all of these things were kind of surfacing up for me. And I was trying to figure out who am I going to be as a mother and also as an ambitious career woman. And that's when I started to get a little bit lost with people and friendships around me and what they were saying. But I remember just thinking, gosh, I'm taking my foot off the gas pedal working here in Silicon Valley for a entertainment company, MTV. I'm not at their headquarters. That's going to be very limiting for my professional success. I need to be at a company with a headquarters. And when I read Sheryl's commencement speech, and I just thought, who is this amazing woman? I was an avid user of the platform. And I think for myself, I wanted to prove that I could sit at the smart kids table. And there weren't a lot of people that looked like me at Facebook at the time. And advertising sales had just become something that they were testing out as part of the revenue model. And I remember interviewing there. It took me 6 months to get the job because I wasn't their typical person there. And I didn't have tech background or digital sales experience. And I remember the day that I got the email and they said, it's down to two candidates. They had this like way, they would bring in many candidates and they would take it down to a few. And it was against me and one other person. And they said, you have to come Monday morning at 8 a.m. to our offices in Menlo Park. And we want you to present, a presentation with no more than a dozen slides on like the future of Facebook. I was like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? Like, who am I? What? And so I remember telling my husband that night, I said, you know what? I'm not going to pursue this Facebook thing. Like, can you believe this like lame request that I come down there? Like, I'm above that. Like, if they don't see how great I am, they don't deserve me. And my husband just looked at me and he was like, you're scared. I was like, no, I'm not. I could totally do this. He's like, then you turn them down after you get the job, not before. And I hated the fact that he said that because he was right. I was scared and I didn't want to have to like suffer through, presenting something about something I knew nothing about to people who knew a lot about it within the company. And I did. So I took the next week to put together my presentation. That morning I woke up at like 5:30. It was a long drive down there. And he said, I've made arrangements. I'm driving you down there and I'm going to wait in the parking lot. So you have your support system outside. And I did. I presented it and I don't even know what I said now, but it obviously worked. And when I got the job, I remember the offer came and it was 6 figures less than what I had been making. And for me, this was this pivotal moment where I was going to take a huge pay cut for the opportunity to work at what we all thought was going to be a rocket ship, but we weren't sure how big. And I just had a lot of questions. I asked a lot of my girlfriends, what do you think? And of course, on paper, it made no sense. It's like, why would you work longer hours, have an uphill battle, learning something new, have a 3-hour-a-day commute, and you were considering having a second child for less money? It made no sense. Regardless, I just thought I had to prove myself in this next chapter that I could sit at the smart kids table and I could choose my seat there. And I did. And then there was that whole like equity thing, that I had not placed any value in, which ended up being great. Yeah. But I think for me, it was one of those moments where, just believe in yourself. The money will follow, but the opportunity to prove yourself means so much. And, we have one life to live and I want to live every day to the fullest. And so I took that job at Facebook and worked so hard, had my second child there. I had the opportunity to meet Sheryl Sandberg and tell her, how much of a mentor and idol she was from a distance. And we became pretty close pretty early on, as I think you know. And that time, those 5 years at Facebook changed my life personally and professionally. And so I equate that of being the chapter of proving to myself that my value is not just in the amount of money I'm making, but in the impact I'm having. And working for a mission-driven company like Facebook really mattered to me. And then that gave me the courage to go on to my third chapter, which is like, if I could work for like an amazing entrepreneur and his organization, could I start my own? And that's where the journey of Birdies began.
And I remember this so clearly because when Bianca and I first got to know each other, I think it was actually one of the events that we had where we'd actually listened to Sheryl, and then we went for a walk and Bianca's like, I've got this idea I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
And as me as an entrepreneur and Bianca growing up sort of in the corporate world, I just remember that so clearly how that feels like it was almost yesterday, you having this conversation on, I've got this business idea and this concept to fast forward to today, and I don't want to ruin the story, but where you are today from that conversation is a whirlwind. So tell us about the Birdies journey.
Totally. Well, so for years, I had complained that when I entertained friends and family at home, which I love to do, I didn't have anything to wear on my feet. You'd wear like a cute outfit, as we all have on right now, and you're either like barefoot or in pajama slippers or socks. I didn't love wearing shoes inside my home. It's just like keep the dirt outside, protect the home. And so I just, over many, many years, with my husband and with my family for Christmas, they would always try to get me the best slippers on the market, but they never really were the right suitable choice for what I wanted. And so one day I remember going into a Nordstrom or Bloomingdale's and I asked for stylish slippers for the home. And they sent me to the lingerie department. And that's when I realized, okay, if I think about the white space in footwear, you have slippers for the bedroom and bathroom time of home. Your hair's in a bun, you're taking off your makeup, you're in your pajamas. And then you have shoes for when you leave your home. And there was no suitable footwear for the yummiest place in life, which is the living room, dining room, kitchen, right? Like all the magic happens in those 3 rooms, and yet there's no footwear for those moments and for those spaces. And so I knew exactly what I wanted. We called it a social slipper at the time. And nobody was even thinking about this. So in 2015, I had been at Facebook for about 4 years, and my husband just said to me, you keep wanting these social slippers. They just don't exist. Why don't you start this once and for all? And I remember thinking what is he talking about? I've never designed anything. I can't even draw a stick figure. I've never worked in retail. Where would I even start, to make this and design it and sell it? And so that night, he had planted that seed and I put the kids to bed and I opened my laptop and poured myself a glass of wine and I just Googled search how to make shoes. And obviously that did not help at all. But that's where I started from. Where does one start with wanting to make something you don't even know how to? But I think, just that light bulb moment of, could I do it? Should I do it? No one else has done it. I don't want to do it. I just want to buy it. But it just sort of carried on creatively with me. And so during my commutes to work in the morning, I was thinking about it. And at work, I was thinking about it. And at the same time, my role at Facebook was to work with large advertisers in the retail space. So Gap, Old Navy, Adidas, Nordstrom, all of these big legacy retailers. And they were having a hard time taking advantage of Facebook as an application to target their customers. And I just thought, gosh, if I could nail this idea, I could leapfrog these big retailers and sell direct to consumer and not go through these slow retailers. So that really sort of expedited it for me. And so I started talking to people, and my co-founder, who was a really good friend of mine, she had just moved from New York to Sacramento. And I just said, listen, you're not working right now. You do have a background in retail. Why don't we do this together? And so it was one of those things where we never thought it would be a VC-backed business. We were just having so much fun with what would they look like? And what would we call it? What would the logo be? And we were moving so fast that ultimately we were able to produce the first iteration of these social slippers, which were, by the way, terrible. And
I still have mine. I wore them out.
Gosh.
Just so you know, I still got them in my closet.
So embarrassed by them. But, I think one of the things I learned while at Facebook, there were all these posters all over campus, just different visuals and phrases. And one of them was, done is better than perfect. Meaning don't over perfect the product before you know what the customer wants. Maybe you're working on something too much that the customer doesn't care about. And by the way, for us, we were maybe nobody cares about having slippers for the entertaining space. So why spend so much time and money perfecting a product nobody wants in general? So we got about, I would say 60% done, not 80. But the shoes came, we each invested $50,000 to start the business, which for us was a lot of money at the time. And all of that money went to producing these shoes overseas. And so when we received them, I remember my co-founder calling me. It was November of 2015. And she was just I cannot believe you accidentally gave the factory my home address. The shoes are in front of my house. And I was like, oh my gosh. To be honest, I didn't even think they'd arrive. You buy these shoes months in advance and you're maybe we're just getting, robbed. They're taking our money and they're never going to arrive. And they did. And she just says to me, you got us in this mess. You have to help get these out of my garage and selling them. So we had no sales plan. We had no money left for marketing or advertising. And it was just sheer determination and hustle. We realized that between the two of us, we had 1,800 friends. And that's how many shoes we had in her garage. And so we just posted some pictures that we took on our iPhones on Instagram or on Facebook at the time, just saying, we started this social slipper business. If people want to buy, please contact us. But the funny thing happened is we accidentally launched right around Thanksgiving, which was that aha moment where people are oh yeah, I guess I'm going to get dressed up. And what would I wear? So it was by total accident that the timing was perfect. But I think a learning for us was just keep moving. And the other philosophy of Facebook was just keep shipping, just keep moving fast, just keep shipping and learn and iterate and grow and change. And so we went through those first 1,800 units. Thank you so much for being one of our first customers. And I'm sorry. Thank you, and I'm sorry.
Well, they were beautiful.
And after we got through all of them, we were hustling. We were telling everybody we knew. And one of our friends of a friend happened to be the editor of the San Francisco Chronicle and wrote a full-page spread about our business. And that sort of broke us out of our network. And we were having a lot of fun. And in 2016, at Facebook, after 5 years, if you're performing well, they'll give you about a month-long sabbatical to do whatever you want. And so I took my sabbatical to really throw myself into Birdies and just see, like, is this an actual business or is it just kind of a fun thing that, is not going to be anything more? So I took the month off at the end of 2016 and the business just exploded and we were having so much fun. And so by the time I went back to work in 2017 for my sabbatical, I had a real dilemma. Because I knew I couldn't be working full-time on Birdies. At the same time, I had an email from a good friend of mine, Andy Dunn. He was the co-founder of Bonobos menswear company. And he said, I want to invest in Birdies and I want to help you raise a round of funding. And I just thought, oh my gosh, could this really be a thing? And I can't raise money from people if I'm not doing this full-time. So that was around the time where I made the hard decision of leaving my full-time job at Facebook and starting chapter 3, which is like not making any money and not working, at the smart kids table, but really just hustling on my own and with my co-founder to really see if we can make this into a big business.
For me, I think there's always a moment when you're talking to men in business where you see their eyes glaze and they kind of clicked it. Oh, you are a colleague. They don't assume that you're a colleague or that business. They don't see you that way. And then there's a moment where it's like, oh, well, I can talk to you about, my problems with the bank but there's it's different. I don't know that people automatically assume that you are their colleague. And I don't, for me.
Interesting.
I think that's almost a universal truth. And I was lucky enough to have lots of great mentors. And one of them was female. Most of them were men, just sort of the dynamics of people in leadership, sort of where we grew up. But I remember her telling me, it was one of the most interesting things, where she had a spouse partner where he was also performing at a very high level in the corporate world. And so often she'd go to events with her husband. And she said, I got such great joy in being underestimated until I had the opportunity to lead in, because she was brilliant MBA. She was an EVP at a large multinational corporation and just one of the smartest people I know. But she almost made it this thing in her mind where there's huge amount of power in being underestimated because you just learn to listen well and ask questions. And then when they ask you a question, inevitably you can lean into it that way. And for some reason that stuck with me from really early. And so I didn't get this chip on my shoulder where I sort of said, well, I need to basically wear a sign that says I'm a CEO or I'm a founder of a company. I always went the other way and I'm like, let them underestimate me. I'm okay with that because sooner or later, usually your experience will stand on its own.
No, and then the mansplaining, which was so that,
totally. Right.
And, but I think it also forces you to be, as you were saying, comfortable just letting folks, because at some point, if you mansplain too long publicly, then you look worse than I ever could, without me even responding. And so I think...
Like let them hang themselves.
Yeah, so you just sit there and let it...
Because I'm always debating in my head, do I just, what's the right thing to do? Like to tell them I'm smart and I got it, or just like let them hang themselves? And I think maybe the let them hang themselves sometimes works. Just let them keep talking and then everybody's aware of what's happening. But not all the time though.
No, but sometimes it's fun to also check people.
Totally, it is fun.
Well, and character matters. True. I mean, I think when it comes down to it, I mean, you talked about Jackson a lot, your husband, but also other men, whether it was one of your first investors or things we've talked about over the years, whether it's your siblings or other people you've worked with. Some of the best mentors and supporters of women are men too, right? And it's sort of that both things can be true simultaneously. And that's what I love, right? I mean, it's as much as we generalize, like data will often generalize, whether it's around gender, whether it's country of origin, where you went to school, any of these things. But often when you actually go back to the human, there's such this sort of vast array of different people when it comes down to character. And I think often what we'll do is when it comes down to character, that's where you'll make that decision. It's a decision tree where you say, oh, do you let them hang themselves, or do you have to stand out there and actually show people your CV, how you interact with them? But I think as we get older, that probably also changes too.
I think so. I think as I've gotten older, I'm like less triggered by it because I feel like I have less, like my background will prove it for itself. When I was younger, I was so determined to prove that I am ambitious and I can do the job. But I remember there was 2 moments in starting Birdies. There was one night I was at some party and I was telling everybody, and I was so excited about this like vision I had for Birdies and what we were going to do. And this man was standing there and, polite, but it's like the little things that they say sometimes that you're just like, really? And everyone's like, I wanted to hear from him, hey, let me know how I can be helpful, or, good luck with your business. And instead he used the word, good luck with your dreams.
Oh, wow.
Totally. And I was so hurt by that. And yet some of the other men were like, wow, he's so supportive of your dreams. I was like, no, that's not how I took it. And then there was this one time we were in, my co-founder and I were in Vietnam, meeting with our factory suppliers, and we're sitting there and there were other folks there from other shoe companies, and we're having lunch together. And one of the guys was from Europe, such a nice guy, but he thought that we were like there helping the company we worked for and whatever, and sort of treating us as such. And then that was the moment where I was like, do I let this go on, or do I just like finally say like, we're actually the founders of the company? And so ultimately I ended up checking him with that. And he goes, oh, entrepreneur girls. Yeah. It was like such a surprise for him. We were laughing and we were like, you know what? We're just going to laugh it off. Cause I think even still today, it's just like people don't take us as seriously as women that can make things happen.
Well, and it's one of those things where I think we were talking about proximity and funding and that role in you funding Birdies, but it is where there are spaces where there are mostly men, then when someone is not there, that's part of why they make assumptions. Some of it is not ill intent. It's not, it's just that, you are used to for the last 20 years, like in this setting. Right. There have only been, maybe one woman and you knew who that was because she's been there for 20 years also, right? And so when there is someone new but how do you encourage more women to be that new person in an industry? How do you...
It's so hard. I just, it's like I've always learned that confidence comes after doing the hard things, not before. Yeah. And so if we wait for women to have the confidence to do something, like we won't, right? And just get that punch in the face or punch in the gut. Like you just have to, you have to be embarrassed a few times before you gain the confidence to go back again. And I don't know if a lot of women or men are comfortable with, just being beat down time and time again. But I think sometimes that's sort of like what it takes. It's like those embarrassing moments that get you through to the other side to realize like, hey, that didn't kill me. Hey, I'm still standing. Hey, I'm still passionate about what I'm doing. I'm just going to keep going. And then you build up your confidence to then become the first woman or person to do something because people haven't seen all of your failures before or all the times that you've stumbled that has given you that thicker skin.
And I also wonder, going back to the nature or nurture question, is when you're entrepreneurial or you're a business owner, your risk tolerance tends to be very different. And so sometimes I actually believe that part of that is innate, where it's just the way that we're wired. Certain people, like I have 2 children, you have 2 children, whether it's nieces or nephews or anyone, we've all had exposure to it. You can have 2 siblings that have almost the same DNA that are completely different, right? And grew up in the same home. With my 2 children, I totally envision one of them's going to go the corporate path and one of them's going to be an entrepreneur. And they couldn't be two different people. But part of it, I think, comes to the risk tolerance and sort of what lights you up when you get out of bed in the morning. And it's, I love how you sort of said you have different chapters, and probably in each of those chapters, a different thing would get you excited. Or you was like McDonald's before, right? Like, and then your educational journey before that. I mean, you've got the most incredible educational story. And then what you're focused on now, like they're very different things. But if you had this life in your 20s, I'm not sure you would have been as excited getting out of bed as what you were doing back then, right? For each of us, I think it's...
I think though there are certain jobs, because I think one thing is you've worked in a restaurant, like we've all worked in restaurants.
Yeah.
So I think that there are places and occupations that help prepare you for other things. I think restaurants is one of those really special places where you learn about grit and you learn about failing because people drop stuff. You get stuff messed up all the time.
You mess up their order. You have an angry
and
table.
they're going to yell at you. Not everyone's going to treat you well.
Yeah, that's right.
So I think there is something about hospitality that does train you for...
or make you realize this is for me or it's not.
Yeah.
Like some people love that and other people are like, you know what, this is not a career path for me.
Yeah. It's actually, I'll tell you both a funny story is, and my team finds this hilarious, is I have almost no one on my teams that I hired that did not grow up in hospitality, because I love exactly what we're talking about. And it's not just, it's hard work. It's not sexy. Often you're not doing it for the money.
Yeah.
People don't always treat you well, like I said. And you have to multitask. Like so often, especially early in your careers, you learn to turn a widget in a company, right? You do a very narrow scope job. Hospitality is about as broad as it can possibly be, where you're just doing so many different things all at once. And then you've got high volume and then slow periods. And so to this day, there's almost no one I've ever hired that did not grow up, at least in college or in high school, waiting tables, bussing tables, working retail. Yeah. I just find it such a good proving ground, and it shows you're willing to work hard. It's a good way to test work ethic.
So how did you think about scaling your business, right? Because founding it, and you'd been in really large organizations previously, right? So to go from that level of support and base to then having to build a team at the right size. And
that was the hardest part for me, I would say. Okay. I think what I've learned looking back is I will run through walls. I will make things happen alone. When I have to start to direct others to help me, or whatever, that's where I get tripped up, because it's just easier for me to do it myself. But as a company is growing and as fast as Birdies was growing, I couldn't do everything myself. And so how do I then change how I am as a leader and become more of a manager of the people and help them and support them to go do what we're trying to do? That was really, really hard for me. I would say for many years with Birdies, the company was almost pulling us. We had this moment where I had been sitting in a marketing meeting with at Old Navy, who was a client of mine at Facebook, and I remember the chief marketing officer talking about their core demographic, and she didn't speak to the person as millions of people, but as one woman who they were serving. This woman had a name, she had a profile, they knew what she had for breakfast, they knew the car she drove. I was like, this is a fascinating way to understand your core customer. So I went home that night and I was like, let's do the same for Birdies. And then if there was one celebrity that embodied Birdies, who would it be and why? And so this was a fun exercise, and we started from, the biggest names in the world, and no, she looks like she wouldn't be a nice host, and no, she looks like she doesn't eat carbs. And, and so we did all these things, and we ultimately landed on somebody who wasn't as well known, but who was wheelhouse Birdies, and this was Meghan Markle. And she was on the show Suits at the time. And I had never even seen the show, but she just embodied everything that Birdies was. I remember she had this Instagram and she was grilling on her big green egg. And I'm like, yeah, girl, she's grilling her own stuff and she's making the food. And so I was like, that's Birdie, that's our girl. And so I asked somebody at Facebook, I just said, does anybody here know of anybody that can get us a pair of shoes to Meghan? And a colleague of mine at Facebook was able to do so. And we shipped them to her. And about 2 months later, we saw her wearing our shoes on her Instagram. And that just started to get the word out about our shoes. And then a few months later, there was speculation that she's dating, Prince Harry. And I was like, oh, can you imagine if that's the case? And she's spotted in London wearing Birdies. She's spotted at the grocery store wearing Birdies. And so it's just the business just started to just crank. And then on Cyber Monday, which is the biggest day for an e-commerce company of 2017, I woke up, as I did every morning, 6 a.m. And the first thing I would do is check sales to figure out what the run rate would be that day. And we had completely sold out. And we had accrued a 30,000 person wait list. Oh, wow. And I was like, boy, these Cyber Mondays really work. And I'm like, this can't be right. Something's wrong. And I opened up Instagram and there it was. The world press had gone crazy about Meghan Markle being engaged to Prince Harry. And the headlines around the world were her favorite flats were Birdies, a slipper fit for a princess. And
couldn't have paid for that.
No. We could not have paid for that. We could not have, but it goes back to, being your authentic self as a brand, identifying your core person. And she continued to wear us even after becoming a royal at every big royal engagement she had, even announcing her pregnancy in New Zealand, wearing Birdies. And so when I say the company, was growing and we were following, it was mostly because of that at the time. We had then just raised another $8 million. Nordstrom, the executives were flying down to San Francisco, selling us to sell to them. And so, of course, I'm thinking I'm a genius at this point, which, look in hindsight, it was just good luck. But I guess the point being that we were hiring fast. And that's where I just started to get tripped up. I went from being an individual contributor by design at Facebook. I never wanted to manage people. I wanted to own my own destiny, to really needing people to help us fulfill, what we were doing. And it's hard being a leader, and I know most people don't want to say that because people want to roll their eyes and be like, "Oh, please, it's hard being a leader." But for me, it really was. I had to learn on the spot how to manage people, and I started with being likable, right? Because that's sort of like what got me ahead in sales. And I learned the hard way that being likable is not always the greatest thing or something that leaders should aspire to be. It's almost like being a parent, right? It's just making sure you have the right guardrails, the right culture, sticking to that, just inspiring your team, being very clear with them. I failed at all of those things. And I think one of the things I learned the hard way was, as they say now, and as I've learned in YPO, which I joined a few years after starting Birdies out of desperation, is, hire slow, fire fast. And I was the queen of the opposite. I learned so much. And it was during that journey and when I raised my first round of capital that I learned about YPO. I had heard of YPO for a long time. And I just remember thinking now's the time. I need people around me that have done this before, that can help me see through the trees, through the forest. And I want to build a big company and I want to learn how other people have done it, have sustained it, how they've managed people. Because I was doing everything wrong. To be honest, if I had to give myself a grade, it was just I was failing as a manager of the people, but I was a great visionary of this slipper shoe brand. But I needed both to be true to get us to the next point of accelerating the company. And certainly during COVID, oh my gosh, that's when you're really pushed to the test as a leader, was managing an organization during, lockdown and a global pandemic that nobody could see coming.
Yeah, it's we're all going to look back on COVID and just be like, we can't believe we lived through that. But clearly, you were obviously very successful. I want to forward now to when you exited the company.
Yeah.
Did you guys plan to sell? Did someone approach you? Tell us about that period in time.
Well, when we started Birdies, we honestly never thought it would have been a venture-backed business, and we never really could imagine it being as large as it did. Towards the end, we were at over 50 million in sales. We had over 2 million customers. We had very high repeat rate. And so the goal was at one point when we raised venture capital money that yes, we were going to sell at some point. So that was something that we were all looking forward to. To be honest, we thought this would have been a sale within 3 to 5 years. During this direct-to-consumer craze, valuations were just enormous. And it was just so much fun.
Allbirds.
Allbirds went public in 2021 at a $4 billion valuation. They had raised hundreds of millions of dollars. The playbook was, just grow. And these businesses were either going public or being bought at multiples of revenue. And so we were well on that track. We were just so motivated and excited. And then COVID hit right around the time that we were thinking about, do we either raise another round of funding, which we had a $20 million term sheet in front of us in March of 2020. Do we raise more capital or do we sell? And we were, the business was doing really well during that time. We were just growing hundreds of percentage points year over year and profitable. And so we turned down the term sheet. We decided not to dilute ourselves. And then a year later, Allbirds went public and we were like, wow, great idea. And then by 2022, 2023, things just started to really change quickly. I think the public markets did not like companies losing money. Allbirds, stock fell. And a lot of the investors were starting to lose faith in, how quickly these direct-to-consumer companies could grow without wholesale distribution. And so there was a big pause in, being able to raise money or selling at the multiples that, we had once seen. And so for us, by 2023, we started to make the decision, like, we should start to consider a sale. Swallow your pride. It's not going to be at the valuations that we had thought were available to us just a couple years prior. And so we went into the market. We hired a banker, which, had been a great journey. And we ultimately landed in a great place. We were bought a year ago by a private equity firm in New York. They've been great partners with us. And I've stayed on for a year during that transition to help through it. But I think the outcome for us was certainly not what we had planned in terms of a valuation standpoint or a financial outcome. But I taught myself that, yes, I can start a company, I can grow a company. And while the first few years I thought I was a genius with everything that was happening to us because the company was exploding, I learned to temper that. And also when things got really hard during COVID, I learned to temper that I wasn't also the worst leader, in the history of leadership. And so as Mark Zuckerberg used to always say at Facebook, you're never as good as they say you are, and you're never as bad as they say you are. And so I think I've learned a valuable lesson of just like tempering, how I feel about myself, and when things are great, give credit where it's due, and also not take all the failure onto myself either.
Well, I appreciate you talking about that, because I think one thing that business leaders oftentimes don't talk about is the mixed bag that can be an exit, right? So everyone tells you congratulations as if all exits are these unicorn events.
Right.
And so I appreciate you sharing that, because not everybody does. Yeah. And it's important for budding entrepreneurs to know that it can exceed your expectations. Right. Sometimes you're disappointed. Right. And it's luck and, But as you think about your future and leadership for the future, what skills do you think you will need, others will need as you enter your fourth chapter?
Yeah. Good question. I think the skills of sales is always going to be something really important for anything in life. You're selling yourself on your future spouse, you're selling yourself for a loan at the bank. You're selling yourself for the person to rent you your apartment. Like your sales is critical, I think, at any stage in our career. So number one, fundamentally, I think everybody needs to understand how to be a strong salesperson and passionate salesperson. And then number two, you can't help, especially where I live, just, AI is just dominating the conversations out there. My kids come home in a Waymo every day from school. That's, a car that has no driver. And I feel safer with those cars than I do any other vehicle with a driver in it. So, I think as I start to prepare for what's next, having a good understanding of what's happening in the world with artificial intelligence and technology, and I find myself trying to play around with all these different applications all the time to just get better at it. I think being really good at asking questions is going to be something that will serve us all well with AI, because it really comes down to the questions that we're asking in order to get the right results and answers. And a lot of people don't know how to ask good questions. They cannot synthesize specifically what it is they're looking for. And so being able to do that. So other than, sales and AI, I'm wrestling with what is it that I'm trying to prove to myself next. And so for now, I'm really leaning into my YPO journey and learning from all of you and trying to figure that out.
I'm so excited. I'm dying to know what's going on in your brain right now about your next ideas, because I have no doubt that they're in there. And it's neat to hear you say, because so many people are talking about AI, but the fact that you're actually dabbling and immersing yourself in it, so often you hear from leaders, they say, well, I don't have time. And recently I heard that Satya Nadella is spending his weekends vibe coding. I'm like, okay, if he's spending his weekends vibe coding, I can find a few hours a week to really lean into this and sort of build some apps and some fun stuff. And so taking it from the conversation, you didn't know this about me, did you?
No.
I'm going to share the app that I built. I will share that.
I am impressed.
Quite proud of myself because I am not a tech person. I'm not from Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
But I think it's important for all of us to be having these conversations. Yes, we're talking about the leaders of the future that are maybe the next generation, but we all still have a few more chapters in our book where we definitely need to be leaning into some of these things in different ways. Even if it does mean keeping the human in the loop, I still think we need to know enough to be dangerous. And it doesn't just mean talking about it. It means doing just like you said you're doing.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Bianca. This has been an absolute joy.
Yes.
And we
so
appreciate
wonderful to be
you.
and both of your presence. I appreciate this so much. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
This is so great.